Hey everyone, it's Matt here, and welcome back to another episode of Commander Adventures. Let's jump into player introductions. First off, we have Devin, looking to steal other people's win with Etali Primal Surge. He kept Red Elemental Blast, Sweltering Suns, Generator Servant, Underworld Breach, and 3 mountains. We then have Spencer, throwing his lands at people with Borborygmos Enraged. He went down to 6 to keep Renata Called to the Hunt, Thran Dynamo, a Forest, a Mountain, Voice of Many, and Rugged Highlands. Then comes Josh, playing Selenia Dark Angel. His deck is focused all around manipulating life totals, and he went to 6 as well to keep Dawn Charm, a Snow-Covered Plains, Hall of Heliod's Generosity, Read the Bones, Angel's Grace, and Wall of Blood. Finally, we have Koi, making non-token creatures into tokens, with Trostani Selesnya's Voice. He kept Rishkar's Expertise, Nylea Keen-Eyed, Birds of Paradise, Scattered Grove, a Plains, Mirror Pool, and Temple of the False God. Devin starts us off. He drops a mountain and passes turn. Spencer drops an Evolving Wilds and cracks it to go and grab a tapped forest. Josh drops a Plains and casts a Soul Ring. And then Will finishes off round 1 with a Wooded Foothills, which he cracks to bring in a forest before casting a Birds of Paradise. Devin drops another mountain and casts a Generator Servant before passing turn. Spencer drops a Rugged Highlands and passes as well. Josh drops a Snow-Covered Swamp, as Spencer remembers his life gain trigger from Highlands. Josh then casts a Read the Bones, and scries a card to the bottom of his library, before drawing 2, and losing 2. He then passes off. Will drops a Mirror Pool and passes as well. Devin drops his 3rd mountain. He casts the tapped Worn Power Stone and passes. Spencer drops a forest and passes as well. Josh drops a Plains. He casts a Wall of Blood for turn and passes. And at his end step, Will cycles Scattered Grove and draws a card. We then move to his turn. He drops a Plains and casts the Nylea Keen-Eyed before passing off. Devin drops a Crystal Vein. He then cracks the Generator Servant as a part of the cost to cast Etali with haste. He moves to combat and swings Etali at Spencer. On attack, he exiles the top card of each player's library. He hits a Garruk Primal Hunter from Spencer and whiffs from everyone else after Spencer takes 6. In main 2, he kills Garruk and draws 6 cards. He then spends his remaining mana into a Bifrost where X is 1 in an attempt to destroy Josh's Soul Ring. Josh responds with a Rebuff the Wicked, and Bifrost is countered. Devin then discards down and passes off. Spencer drops a mountain and casts the Thran Dynamo before passing. Josh drops Hall of Heliod's Generosity and then passes as well. Koi drops a Temple of the False Gods. He casts a Cultivate and brings in a tapped forest and a Plains to hand before passing off. Devin drops a mountain. He moves to combat and swings Etali at Spencer again. He casts Phyrexian Processor off of Etali and pays 10 life into its imprint trigger. He also casts his own Relic of Progenitus, and then Spencer's Eternal Witness, bringing back Bifrost with its ETB. In main 2, Devin recasts Bifrost to destroy both Josh's Soul Ring and Spencer's Thran Dynamo, and as they're both destroyed, he leaves mana for Phyrexian Processor and passes off. Spencer untaps, and then remembers to tick down his life total to the damage from Etali. He drops a forest, and casts Renata Called to the Hunt before passing turn. Josh drops an Isolated Chapel. He casts Kaya's Wrath to wipe the board, and gains a life from his one creature which was destroyed. Before that happens though, Will responds with a Rootborn Defenses, and is unable to populate. Josh then gains his life and passes. Will drops a Plains. He casts his commander Trostani, and passes to Devin. At his end step, Devin creates a 10/10 Phyrexian Horror. He then exiles a card from Josh's graveyard with Relic, and moves to his turn. Devin drops a mountain. He casts Hazoret's Monument, and then a Neheb Dreadhorde Champion. Hazoret's Monument triggers, and Devin discards a Sweltering Suns to draw a card. He follows up with an Endless Atlas, and then moves to combat, swinging his 10/10 Horror at Josh before passing turn. Spencer drops a Forest. He casts Ronus's Monument, and follows up with a Voice of Many, drawing a card on ETB. Josh drops his own Temple of the False Gods. He casts a Platinum Angel, and passes turn. At his end step, Will activates Nylea, and reveals an Altar of Dementia, which he puts into his graveyard. Will drops a Plains. He casts Steve, and misses his life gain trigger as it ETBs. He then casts a Farseek, and shortcuts by sacrificing Steve at the same time. He brings in a Forest tapped with Steve, and a Canopy Vista tapped with Farseek. He then passes off, and at his end step, Devin exiles a card from Josh again with Relic. Devin untaps, and moves to combat. He swings his 10/10 token at Josh, and Neheb at will. Neither player blocks, and damage goes through. As it does, Devin discards 3, draws 3, and adds 3 red mana to Neheb's trigger. He drops a mountain in main 2, and casts Otepec Huntmaster, choosing not to use Hazoret's Monument on cast. He follows up with a Scourge of the Throne, and then activates Phyrexian Processor with his floating mana to create another 10/10, before passing turn. Spencer drops a Forest. He casts a Regal Behemoth, and becomes the Monarch as it ETBs. He casts the Magus of the Wheel, and then moves to combat, swinging his Voice of Many at Devin for 7. Spencer draws at end step from the Monarch before passing off. Josh drops a Swamp. He moves to combat, and hits Spencer for 4 to become the Monarch. He draws at end step, and passes. At his end step, Will activates Nylea, and puts a Woodfall Primus to hand. Will then untaps, and drops a Forest. He casts the Woodfall Primus, and blows up Phyrexian Processor as it ETBs. He then passes off, and at his end step, Devin activates Relic, targeting Josh again. He also activates Endless Atlas to draw a card. Devin untaps, and moves to combat. He swings Scourge of the Throne at will, and the rest of his board at Josh. In response to declaration of attackers, Josh casts a Dawn Charm, preventing all combat damage which would be done this turn. Dethrone still triggers, and Scourge gets a +1/+1 counter, and then untaps all of Devin's attacking creatures. All damage is then prevented, and Devin skips through his second combat. In main 2, he activates Relic, and exiles another card from Josh's graveyard. He casts an Abrade to destroy Platinum Angel, and then passes off. Spencer drops a mountain. He swings Voice of Many at Josh, and reclaims the Monarch token. With his mana doubled once again, Spencer casts his commander Borborygmos. He cracks Magus of the Wheel, and in response, Josh casts an Angel's Grace, since he's losing it anyways. And as everyone wheels, we'll be right back. After the wheel, Spencer casts the Mulch, and reveals a pair of lands, which he puts to hand. He then casts a Harmonize, and draws 3 more. Before casting a Birds of Paradise, and moving to his end step. He draws from the Monarch token, discards down, and passes to Josh. Josh untaps. He drops a Plains and casts a Tragic Arrogance. In response, Spencer throws 6 lands at Josh, eliminating him from the game and exiling his spell. Before turn passes, Will Beast Within's Borborygmos to prevent that from happening again. Will then untaps and drops a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it and brings in a Forest. He follows up with an Exploration and then drops a Plains as his second land. He then cracks Mirror Pool to create a token copy of Woodfall Primus. He targets Endless Atlas with its ETB, and Devin activates it in response. Endless Atlas is then destroyed, and Koi misses his life gain from Trostani again. Will then activates Trostani and populates his token copy of Woodfall, destroying Worn Powerstone and missing his life gain again. He then casts a Fierce Empath and goes to search his library. Before he does, they finally catch all the missed life gain triggers. Will gains 19 life to make up for this, and then resolves Fierce Empath, revealing an Uvenwald Hydra and putting it to hand. Before passing turn, Devin drops a mountain. He recasts Etali, cracking Crystal Vein to do so. He goes to move to combat, and remembers to give Etali haste from Otepec Huntmaster. He swings Neheb and Etali at Spencer, and everything else at Will. To Throne and Etali both trigger, and then Devin gets to cast a Sylvan Library from Will. Spencer blocks Etali, and then Will takes 25 damage, before Spencer takes 5 from Neheb. Neheb triggers on damage, and Devin discards 6, draws 6, and adds 6 mana. He then moves to his second combat, and attacks the same way again. Etali triggers, and Devin casts Spencer's Tooth and Nail, choosing not to pay the additional Entwine cost. He grabs a Meteor Golem and a Conduit of Ruin, and then Will blocks the processor tokens with the original Woodfall Primus and a token copy, and then takes 8 more from Scourge. Neheb triggers, and Devin discards 6, before drawing 6, and adding 6 mana. They remember the Monarch token, and Persist triggers, bringing back Woodfall Primus, gaining Will 5 life, and somehow missing the ETB from Woodfall Primus. In his second main phase, Devin casts the Sunbird's Invocation. He follows up with a Meteor Golem, and casts Geosurge thanks to Sunbirds. Meteor Golem then hits, and destroys the token copy of Woodfall Primus. He casts the Conduit of Ruin, and resolves its cast trigger first, failing to find. He then resolves Sunbird's Invocation, and casts the Coveted Jewel. As the Coveted Jewel enters, Devin draws 3 cards. He moves to end step, and draws from the Monarch trigger, before discarding down, and passing off. Spencer drops a Forest. He recasts Borborygmos, and gives Regal Behemoth Monument's trigger. He moves to combat, and swings at Devin for 10. Devin blocks, and 2 damage tramples through as Spencer becomes the Monarch. He draws at end step, and passes off to Will. Will untaps. He casts the Zendikar Resurgent, and follows up with an Uvenwald Hydra. He tutors up a Rogue's Passage tapped, and then gains a total of 12 life thanks to Trostani, before remembering he needed to draw a card from Zendikar Resurgent. He then casts an Angel of Sanctions. He draws a card on cast, and gains 3 life, before exiling Neheb. He follows up with a Wall of Blossoms, and draws again on cast, before drawing on ETB, and gaining 4 life. He then passes off, and Devin exiles a card with Relic on his end step. Devin triggers Sylvan Library on his upkeep. He takes 4 to keep one of the cards, and then drops a Rogue's Passage. He overloads Midgame Mortars, and kills a handful of creatures on Will's board. He remembers the trigger from Sunbird's Invocation, and uses it to cast a Thrill of Possibility, discarding a hand where battlements is an additional cost. He moves to combat, and swings Etali at Spencer, and the rest of his board at will. Dethrone triggers first, and then the Etali trigger whiffs. Blocks then happen, and Scourge, Etali, Uvenwald Hydra, and Borborygmos all end up dying. Will takes 20 damage. Devin moves to his extra combat, and swings 20 more at Will, who blocks with both Woodfall Primus and Nylea. In main 2, Devin casts an Inferno Titan, and kills both Trostani and Regal Behemoth, before pinging Will. He then passes off. Spencer untaps. He Beast Withins Devin Sunbird's Invocation, and Devin creates a 3/3 beast. Spencer then casts a Crucible of Worlds, and plays a mountain from his graveyard. He moves to end step, and draws from the Monarch token before passing. Will untaps. He casts an Nyxbloom Ancient, and draws a card from Zendikar Resurgent. He follows up with a Helm of the Host, and equips it to Nyxbloom Ancient. He recasts Trostani, and draws from Zendikar Resurgent. He casts an Endrace Forerunners, and gains 7 life from Trostani, before drawing a card from Resurgent. He drops the Plains, and then follows up with an Explore. He draws, and then plays a Tranquil Thicket as his additional land. He follows up with an Idyllic Tutor, and grabs a Greater Good, which he casts. He sacrifices Nylea to Greater Good, and draws 5, before discarding 3. He casts the Shalai, and draws from Zendikar Resurgent, before gaining 4 from Trostani. He drops Windswept Heath, and cracks it to go and grab a forest. He then casts Seedborn Muse, drawing on cast, and gaining 4 more on ETB. He then moves to combat, and creates a token copy of Nyxbloom Ancient. He activates Rogue's Passage, and makes his token copy unblockable. He swings it at Devin, who can't block, and Will gains control of Coveted Jewel on damage, drawing 3 cards in the process. In main 2, he taps Coveted Jewel for 27 green mana, which he uses to cast a Genesis Wave where X is 24. He hits these cards as valid permanents, and begins to resolve all of them. He gains a total of 12 life from all the creatures entering the battlefield, and the table disregards the rest of his triggers because he hit an Aetherflux Reservoir. He casts a Vitu-Ghazi Guildmage from hand, and is now able to populate an exponentially large amount of Nyxbloom Ancient tokens. As he does so either now or on Devin's upkeep, he generates more than enough life from Trostani to eliminate both Devin and Spencer with Aetherflux, and walk away with a win.